Hey everybody, welcome to more week 2 in our series Pass It On. We began this conversation a couple weeks ago thinking about how we are going to pass on our faith to those who are coming behind us. We've been using 1 Timothy chapter 4 as kind of our guide through this conversation. We started with the idea of live it out in week 1, and then this past Sunday we began the conversation about how we would actually have a conversation about these things, talk about it. And we were really challenged that we have to do that, right? We have to read the word. We have to preach or exhort the word to them. We have to teach the word to this generation that is now on its way up. We also used Deuteronomy chapter 6. And if you looked at more from last week, you know that was kind of our framework and more last week. So I want to read a verse that probably is, again, familiar to you if you've been in church for any length of time, and that is Proverbs chapter 22, verse number 6. A couple of different things. If you have been in church and you've read it before, then you know that you probably have heard it as train up a child in the way he should go. Train up a child in the way he should go. The CSB says it this way. Again, Proverbs 22, verse 6. Start a youth out on his way. Even when he grows old, he will not depart from it. There's something about that idea of starting right and training. Training sometimes seems a little more, like an athletic event or a soldier in training or something. But that idea of start out a youth from the beginning on the way he should go. Start out a youth and moving them on the right path. I think there's something about that at least captures my imagination. I think that even though as we've looked at some of these statistics, we've been startled, I think that many of us would say that we do see the importance of training, spiritually training, or starting our youth out, our children out on the right path. It really is important. I think we want our kids to love the Lord with all their hearts, and I think we want them to have eternal security because they've come into a personal relationship with Jesus, placing their trust in Him. I think we get the why of all that. It's the how that sometimes is difficult for us, like how we wrap our mind around it. I remember when our kids were extremely small, just the idea of helping them stay still enough to read a devotional thought or pray with them seemed more like a challenge than a blessing. And some of you are in that season right now. And as they got older, schedules and all the things that come with life, whether it was something at school or sports related or eventually even work related, were challenges. How do you get everybody on the same page? And we talked about some of that this past Sunday. At your location, I'm sure your location pastor was sharing some very practical ways for you to do that very thing. I think the caution that I would give to us in making certain we understand when we say start a youth out on his way is this. Phil Vischer may be a name that is familiar to some of us and maybe not to others. Phil Vischer was the creator of kind of a big deal called VeggieTales. So some of you have seen those, your children watch those. It was kind of part of the life of the early 2000s in church. There were VeggieTales for everything, Bible stories and moral teachings, all these things. VeggieTales was huge. And Phil, about 10 years after all of that, looked back on it and made this statement. He said, I realized that what I wanted VeggieTales to do was different than what it did. What it did was train children to be Christianly. What it didn't do was train children how to invest their life in Christianity. He talked about all the moral values that came out of that, about being nice to others, about doing good, about being kind, all those things. And those are all good things. But the idea of digging into the word itself and letting it truly train up, he said he feels like he missed that a little bit. I found that interesting because I see his point, and I think that we, as we start thinking about training our children or the children coming up, we want to make certain that we are grounding them in the things that Moses said in Deuteronomy 6, that we would share these things, the commandments that I've given you. Train them into your children, teach them to your children, use them to guide your children in conversation. And so I want to offer a couple of thoughts to you in this, and then allow some questions, because I think this is a great conversation, particularly if you're doing this as a group. It's a great conversation for maybe for you to just share ideas of what has worked in your family, or maybe why you've never really tried this, and maybe getting some advice on how to try it. And then if you're doing this alone, maybe just to reflect on maybe just some personal application for you as you think about sharing the things that are important to you when it comes to faith with your children. So first of all, I would just say this. I think you have to use every moment as a teachable moment. It doesn't mean every moment will be a teachable moment, but I think you have to look for it to be a teachable moment. I think that every conversation has an opportunity for you to draw into it faith-based thoughts and questions and conversations. Again, not every conversation will lend itself to that, but if you're alert to it, if you're looking for it, if you're wanting that to be, you'll see it much more readily than if you never think about that aspect of it at all. So look for teachable moments in every conversation to make that conversation valuable for them. And in that conversation, when you have those conversations, always point them back to the Bible. Let the Bible be the guide in that. The second thing is when you have those moments where you're all together, make certain that the distractions are reduced or eliminated. I love this idea that I've read several different places, several different blogs, about making dinner time a device-free time. Put all the electronics away. Put the iPads away so that they're not watching videos. Put the phones down. Turn the TVs off, and just allow that time to be a time where you can spend time together. And then maybe that's where you can intentionally add to that time a devotional thought, a passage of scripture, some conversational starter questions that maybe will get people thinking and talking a little bit more. But eliminate the distractions when you're all together. It doesn't have to be forever, but for a short period of time, the duration of dinner, cut it all off and just spend that time together. And then the third thing maybe I would say is this: keep your faith front and center. Don't allow yourself to slip back and not live your faith out before them. We really need to make certain that they see our faith in all that we're saying, that we really do, as we said Sunday, believe what we say we believe. So live your faith out before them. When you're struggling, be transparent about that. When you have questions, be transparent about that. But keep your faith front and center. Our kids are always paying attention, from the littlest age all the way up. They're always paying attention. Don't miss the opportunity to put Jesus out front and center from your faith so that they see that and it has an impact on their life. Well, next week we finish this series, and we will finish our time and more in this series. So I hope you'll come back and join me there as we move to the very last part of how we do all of this together. The home, the church, families, individuals, fighting for and believing in this next generation. God bless you guys. Thanks for being here with us on More this week. We'll see you then.